Well, hello and welcome to session 2. For those of you that are able to attend the opening session, where we had some great presentations and discussions from Nikki from ECC and Lucy from Essex Fire Service. Fascinating, I found that first set of discussions in the terms of the honesty of reflections of where the respective organisations were at the beginning of their journey. What was it that was a catalyst for change? What was the components and ingredients that created the environment for change to happen? And again, how both different organisations approached it. What was the approach to it? Slightly different from both as well. And then identifying what the barriers had been and continue to be to a certain degree to truly embed it in the organisation. So thank you to Nikki and Lucy for a great start for our session. Now, we have an exciting one ahead now, AI essentials. What do we need to know about using artificial intelligence in the public sector? So in a moment, I'm going to hand over to the first of our presenters, but we've got 3 top class presenters. Anna Gibson, who is the Senior Data Analyst at the London Borough of Hackney. We've got Eddie Copeland, Director of the London Office of Innovation and Technology. Some of you may know it as Lottie. And Kieran Johnson, a technology strategist from Microsoft. So in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Anna to kick us off. But before I do, it's just worth mentioning, I think, that the public interest in AI has really increased significantly, probably since 2023, with the launch of ChatGPT, which I'm sure we've all got on our mobile phones. And that kind of buzz of AI everywhere, and an area where the pace of evolution is so accelerated, it becomes difficult to cut through the hype and to make time for some considered thought on this subject. So we held our first event actually with my cabinet and the Essex County Council leadership team on the topic only just last week, actually. And we used it as an opportunity to really explore what AI is and what it isn't, and what the impact it is having on people in the world of work. And I remember it's fascinating. We did a kind of first little question out. Those of you who are terrified of the thought of AI, and those of you who think it could be the greatest thing. And actually, interestingly, some people voted on both sides of the spectrum. On the one side, they thought it was really, really exciting. They could see the opportunities for almost a revolution about how we approach the interaction with our residents. But on the other side, of course, goodness me, does that mean we're going to have robots walking around shooting us all as well, kind of stuff. So that's the kind of sense actually where the public are probably feeling about AI as well. So as a public sector, as public sector servants, we have a role to play in helping our workforce navigate the use of artificial intelligence that can help us keep up and support the productivity. It's like having an extra teammate on hand and have a role to play in setting the right level of AI ambition. Because again, with any new technology, you could think, wow, let's just go for it, let's throw everything at it as well. But it requires some careful thinking about what should be the right level of ambition. So starting perhaps by selecting those key business problems that we think we can use game-changing AI capabilities to help us to support transformation. And importantly, we learned that whatever direction we take, we really do need to consider it from the human-machine relationship. What useful role can AI provide us, and how does it make us feel? What decisions are we delegating? What guardrails do we need to have in place? So the term AI covers such a vast amount of things, and we must balance the potential benefits with responsible application. So I'm delighted, and I'm bigging them up big time here, to have 3 experts who will help us to understand this better and share their experiences. I'm really looking forward to this session. And I'll begin, if I might, by welcoming Anna from Hackney. And Anna, you're going to talk to us for about 15 minutes about what AI and generative AI is and how it might help us at work. So a warm welcome to you, Anna.
Thank you. Thanks, Gavin. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm going to share some slides now, so just bear with me for a second. 1 second. Okay. Does that look good?
Yes, yep, we can see your screen.
Yep. Okay, brilliant. Right. So yeah, my name's Anna Gibson. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm a senior data analyst at Hackney Council, and I've been invited to talk about the guidance that we shared with our staff sort of starting last year. So I was just looking at the poll that was shared, and I can see there's like a 60-40 split between those who had used ChatGPT or something similar and those who hadn't. So that's really interesting, because I think when we ran this poll with staff at Hackney, then the percentage of those who'd used it was much less. So you can already see how the uptake has increased just in the last 6 months or so. So just to explain where I come from, so I'm at Hackney Council and I'm within the Data and Insight team. And Data and Insight team at Hackney, we sit within ICT, but we support we support different service areas. Sometimes we're much more embedded into the area, such as housing and planning and social care. And then for other service areas who have their own data analysts, we work alongside them and offer the kind of technical expertise and help them do their analysis. So we have sort of different relationships with services across the council. And why did we run these sessions on AI at Hackney? So, well, yeah, the last year, 2023, there was a huge proliferation of media interest and availability of generative AI tools such as ChatGPT. And it became clear that we needed to provide our staff with some straightforward guidance that would tell them about how they can and can't use these tools at work. So we built on guidance from colleagues at Greenwich Council. At the same time, the UK government published their initial guidance for civil servants as well. So we just wanted to make sure that staff at Hackney knew about our guidance and understood it. And we worked with our cybersecurity team within ICT to make sure that we were kind of touching on all points to do with AI and how to use the tools. So what I'll cover today is what is artificial intelligence, what is generative AI, what are the risks, what are the opportunities, and where to find guidance. So what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence, or AI, as it's more commonly known now, is the field of computer science that's dedicated to solving cognitive problems that we often associate with human intelligence, such as learning, problem solving, and pattern recognition. So AI, according to the World Economic Forum, is disrupting practically every industry in every country. It seems to be everywhere. So artificial intelligence is kind of the overarching concept. So it's any technique that enables computers to act or to mimic human behavior. And then within that, we have machine learning, which is a subset of AI, which then uses more statistical methods to enable machines to improve their learning and to be able to be trained on real data. And then within that, we have a smaller subset called deep learning, which uses concepts known as neural networks, which are kind of mimicking how the brain works. And this enables this generative AI, so to actually generate new information and new data. So in everyday life, AI is everywhere. So even if you think you haven't used it, you actually have. So we use it all the time to open our phone, to when we have facial recognition. We use it in Spotify. You may have noticed your email provider might be doing autocomplete for you. Netflix recommendations, Alexa. If you use Waze, then it's using machine learning to sort of generate new directions and new routes. Even Domino's. And then Copilot, which is sort of Microsoft's product as well. So it really is everywhere, and it really is changing the way that we live and work. So what is generative AI? So this is a type of artificial intelligence that enables machines to create new content. So this could be text, images, video, audio, synthetic data, or code. So these generative AI models, like ChatGPT, that create text, so we sort of think of them as chatbots, then they use large language models, or LLMs, that are trained on vast amounts of text data and can then generate text responses that appear human. So it feels like you're having a conversation with the tool, with ChatGPT. And you may have heard of generative AI being kind of shortened to Gen AI, because it's quite a mouthful. So here's an example of two of the sort of the big kind of leaders in these sort of generative AI chatbots. So we've got ChatGPT and Copilot. And I just asked a simple question, which is what are the top 5 things to see in New York in 2024? So the first response is from Copilot, and it returns this sort of piece of text telling me all about, what I should see. And it also provides you, quite importantly, with where it got the information from, which is really important when we're being transparent. And then ChatGPT, this is the free version that I was using. So it already says, as of my last knowledge update in January 2022, then it can only provide information for information at that time. So it's already saying that it's not up to date. But again, it tries to answer the question and to provide me with some ideas. And interestingly, then what they come out with are quite different. So some other examples of generative AI. So we have AI art. So on the right, we've got an image that was generated through this tool called Midjourney. And this is of the Pope wearing a sort of a funky white puffer jacket. And it really did fool a lot of people. People thought this was real, but this is completely made up. This is made up of just from, a computer made this. So this is not real, but it fooled a lot of people, which is where we, start to see sort of some of the risks of AI. There's also systems that create music, such as Jukebox. ChatGPT or Copilot is great for just starting some documents up and creating a structure. Grammarly is a popular tool for adjusting grammar and sort of that tone of voice and text. And then we've seen GitHub Copilot and also more recently Google's DeepMind Gemini for generating code for software development. And then we're also now seeing, in response to this, tools that enable you to identify AI generated content. So an example is Google DeepMind Synth ID. So that will tell you if an image is real or whether it was created through AI. So we're already seeing these tools that are working to sort of almost sort of undermine the tools that kind of came out at the start. So this is a powerful, exciting and fast-moving technology that can and most likely will change the way that we work in the future. So obviously there are some risks. So I'm going to go through these bullet points. So first risk is that we breach data. So entering in sensitive information, passwords, people's names into, say, ChatGPT and releasing it into the wild, so to speak. So this happened at Samsung, where they released a lot of proprietary code into ChatGPT. And then that code is now lost and it's available to the world, even though it was their own secret code. There's the risk that we put too much trust into AI outputs. So these could be wrong. AI can easily provide misinformation or make a poor decision. So Air Canada had a chatbot and it provided a customer with incorrect information about claiming a bereavement fare. And controversially, Air Canada actually blamed the chatbot rather than taking the responsibility themselves. So it's sort of being aware of the kind of limitations of AI if you choose to implement it. And then if data is biased, then AI will be biased. So we know that facial recognition technologies have more often misidentified Black and global majority people and amplified systemic racism because they've been trained on more images of white people. So this, again, is really, really important about how we might use AI. And then some more risks is just being unethical and using it and not being transparent enough. So, we risk reputational damage and we could lose public trust. Interestingly, then we know that residents could be using AI to write complaints, to make freedom of information requests and to respond to consultations. So we know that there's an example for a student in York who used ChatGPT to draft a letter to get her parking fine revoked, which was perfectly fine, but it's just something to be aware of, that our residents will be using this as well. And we have to be mindful of some letters or some things we get from them may not be completely true. And then the big one really is AI that can be used by bad actors to create something like phishing attacks, malware, committing fraud. For example, Ticketmaster was recently fined by the Information Commissioner's Office after a hacker used their chatbot to access customer payment details. So there's always going to be people and organisations that are going to use AI for bad purposes rather than for good. So in summary, this is what we've said to staff at Hackney is ask yourself when you're using ChatGPT or something like that, are you giving the tool any information that shouldn't be made public? So this could be names, passwords, or sensitive information about the council or about residents. So, you know, don't put your social work case notes into ChatGPT and, you know, ask it to summarise something. It seems like common sense, but it's so easy to do. Is the information that the chatbot or the tool is trained on, is it up to date? Is it accurate? Is it matching up with other search results? So it's all about cross-referencing the information you're getting from your say ChatGPT or from your Gen AI tool and checking it, cross-checking it, making sure it's correct and not making things up. And thinking, can the response be biased? And finally, should I be referencing or disclosing the use of generative AI? So within this slide deck, then all the images have been created through DALL-E 2, which is an open AI, generative AI image tool. And we have captioned everything to make it clear that this was completely generated by AI. So how can AI be used? So there's lots of opportunities, and a nice phrase here, which is dig into every industry and you'll find AI changing the nature of work. So opportunities, so increased productivity. So AI as a personal assistant to help staff summarise text, take meeting notes, drafting letters and creating kind of those first drafts of reports or generating ideas for interview questions or creating images for presentations so you haven't got to worry about the copyright. And then also there's definitely a big use for it being used as a customer service agent. So it could handle simple sort of transactional queries that we get from residents or enable them to do sort of simple things like you know, set up an account or something like that. So there's definitely big opportunities here if it's used responsibly. And then in terms of better insights, so these tools have the ability to analyse large volumes of unstructured data and to extract patterns and respond to freedom of information requests and fulfil subject action. Fulfil SARs. And then we're already using machine learning at Hackney, and there's a you know, we're sort of thinking about how could we maybe use this sort of next step of AI to create even sort of more powerful predictive models to identify signals of distress and provide residents with kind of early interventions and proactive support. And then another great use case is detecting anomalies. So looking for those patterns in large volumes of data that don't seem right and detecting fraud. So to sum up, where can I find guidance? So there's sort of 3 links here. The first one is from Lottie, and we really like this guidance. It's really well put together and it's really nice to read. So this is a great place to start. There's also the UK government guidance, which is quite extensive, but provides a huge amount of information. And then we're also making available the guidance that we put together for council staff as well. And that's me. That's everything that I have to say.
Brilliant. Anna, thank you so much for that. That was really fascinating. And thank you for sharing it. Maybe we'll get the opportunity to explore some of those a little bit more in the Q&A that we do later. So cracking start. Now, I think we're going to hand over now to Eddie Copeland from Lottie. Eddie was one of the team that met with my cabinet and senior leadership team last week. Welcome back, Eddie. Seems we just can't say no to you. So great to see you. And Eddie, if we may, over to you for your thoughts.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for having me back. Let me just try sharing my screen, and there we go. If someone can just confirm they can see a garishly pink slide in just a sec. Can I check you can see that? You can. Wonderful. Okay. So hi, everyone. My name's Eddie Copeland from an organisation that Anna has just mentioned, the London Office of Technology and Innovation, Lottie for short. And it's our job to work with all the boroughs across London and the Mayor's Office, helping them work together, bringing innovation, data and technology to improve London's public services and tackle some of the big challenges that the city faces. One of the things that we describe when we talk about what we exist to do is kind of to make sure that in these very, very challenging times for local government, that all councils have access to a truly 21st century toolkit. You know, as we're trying to look at social care reform, improve our services, engage with residents, we want to make sure you've got every tool and method at your disposal. And now the exciting thing about this is that every now and then a tool comes along that slightly changes the game, that enables us to do even more. And I think as responsible public sector employees, it's our job to think, how can we take the very best out there and apply it to solve issues that really matter to our residents? So you've heard some great examples already from Anna, both sort of hypothetical ones and some really tangible ones. And I thought what I would do today is just to flesh it out with some of the practical examples that we're seeing at the moment and some of the ones that we expect to see in the not so distant future in mostly London local government, but also right around the country. So there's lots of different definitions you'll have heard when it comes to AI. One key thing to mention is that although there's lots of hype right now about generative AI, it's not a massively new thing in terms of local government use of AI, full stop. On the left here, you'll see some I've sort of categorized as being narrow AI. I mean narrow in terms of what they're asked to do. Some of you will be familiar with the fact you can get sort of chess AI bots that are very narrowly good at doing chess, nothing else, but very, very good at chess. Similarly, in local government, we have been using AI for quite a number of years now for doing things like predicting and modeling changes, analyzing huge quantities of data, finding that sort of needle in the haystack, ranking things, seeing things with sort of computer vision and automating basic tasks. I'll give you some practical examples of those in just a moment. And then, of course, our recent wave, the excitement we've seen over the last few months and last year or so, generative AI, as Anna has already explained, that ability to create new content, whether it be sort of text, image, music, or lots of those other tools that you just heard about, which has really captured people's attention. One of the key reasons I think this distinction is helpful is that all these past uses of AI would mostly have been used by local authority digital and data teams. It would just be some very specialist roles looking at that form of AI. The generative AI stuff, I don't know if you've had the conversation before, but how many of you have interacted already in any of the tools that Anna mentioned, ChatGPT and so on? This is very different in terms of the sheer reach of the number of people, residents included, who are using what would have previously been a very, very specialist tool. The effect on our organizations of having it being so ubiquitous is a bit of a game changer, and again, why we need to sort of have these sorts of conversations. So let's dive into some practical examples. So this is of those narrow examples initially. In Harrow, they have recently been working with a company called Cyclomedia to do really high fidelity visual scans of the whole borough. Many of you will have used Google Street View, you know, part of Google Maps where you drop a little person onto a street and you can look around. This is a much higher resolution version of that. And what it does is they can add AI on top of that very high fidelity imagery so that they can ask it to say, show us where all the potholes are, show us every sign that might be slightly broken, tell us what every single sign in the borough says, tell us which signs are covered by bushes, or tell us the height of buildings. And the idea is that what it enables the council to do is to prevent the need for some frontline workers to actually have to go out and physically visit things in person. Some planning approvals, some action in part of the public realm may be possible to do remotely. Very basic example, if someone wants to apply for a dropped curb in front of their house, now it's very, very easy for the council just to say, well, we can see the measurements, we can see the surrounding area, we can confidently make a judgment call on that remotely. This is already saving them money. Swindon Council has been using AI to reduce their translation costs. You see here by 99.96%. Clearly means all of us can now translate documents that might have been impossible to do before just through lack of resource, and also the time turnaround. So for those of us with areas where we've got communities from different backgrounds, where English may be a second language or English may not be spoken at all, having that ability to translate might just help us to reach communities that have been challenging to do in the past. The bottom left here, the South London Partnership. It's a cluster of 5 boroughs in the south of London. They've been putting sensors along roads and inside gullyways to monitor which ones are blocked, so that they can see, well, when there's heavy rainfall due, they can preemptively clear some of those drains to prevent flooding. Lots of local authorities right now having to think about how we adapt to climate change in our respective areas. The ability to use AI plus some technology out there in our physical spaces is offering the ability to stay ahead of the game, prevent issues like flooding, and if it can't be avoided, at least to warn residents and make sure that vulnerable people are looked after really, really well. And then on the bottom right here, this is the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. They're playing around at the moment with the idea of using AI to look at images sent in by local residents of graffiti. It can categorize the type of graffiti and also spot if there are offensive words within it, so they can start prioritizing their work of like which graffiti should be removed with the most urgency. Still at prototype stage, but really interesting to see what else that might be applied to when residents report issues locally. And on the generative AI front, top left here, Westminster has been looking at capturing the insight from some of their resident surveys. All local authorities are sort of actively engaging with residents, surveys, consultations. Sometimes, as you know, that can generate huge amounts of text, very difficult to try and sort of distill and do all the sense making around that. This is something AI is incredibly good at doing, and they're using it to spot those key messages, spot issues of gravest concern, trying to look at the sentiment behind how sort of angry or full of praise a certain response was, to get a better understanding of how residents feel. In Brent, top right here, some of you will be aware that the Housing Ombudsman recently has reduced the time that local authorities have to be able to respond to resident complaints. It used to be about 20 days. I believe it's now 10. The ability to use generative AI to come up with the first cut of a response to resident queries, but also to understand common trends in those problems, is proving really, really helpful. And the bottom left here, in Kingston, they've been using an AI assistant for social care. And the idea is that when a social worker is interacting with a vulnerable individual, they can record that conversation and have it automatically transcribed by the AI, enabling them to have a much more human-to-human conversation rather than furiously tapping away at their laptop. But it can also come up with the first cut of the case notes, and also generate draft emails to all the stakeholders who need to be informed about someone's situation, saving time. And when I talk to social workers, it seems fairly common across the sector that up to 30% of all their time is spent on that sort of records creation and management. If we can meaningfully shift the productivity there, as Kingston's tool that they're using from an organisation called Beam has done, in some cases it can save 15 hours of caseworker time per month. This is the kind of productivity gain we need, given some of the pressures we see in areas like social care. And finally, on the bottom right here, you're hearing about tools like Copilot that plug in directly to your Microsoft environment, so you can transcribe meetings without having someone taking the minutes. You can come up with actions lists, come up with first drafts, combine lots of different documents into one, create first versions of a presentation, for example. So some key tools that all of us will be able to benefit from. Let me then just switch just to a couple of hypothetical examples moving ahead. How might this sort of affect some of the roles in local government? And I think the best way to think about AI is it's not going to necessarily fundamentally change people's roles. It might change some of the tasks you perform within them. So here's an example of Anjali, a housing policy officer. Now, Anjali, you see here, is generating a briefing for a cabinet meeting, and she's using the same default format but different sources from across the council. So lots of our organisations will have an in-house style that certain reports have to be in. The AI can create the first cut of your report in that format. And you see here, Anjali might have been using some spreadsheets, some other Word documents, lots of different information, interviews, etc. And she can tell it, take information from all of this to come up with the first version of my report, saving her time, putting her into the position of reviewing and editing rather than coming up with a report from scratch. She might be responsible for retrofit policies. So these are the policies where we're trying to upgrade homes with insulation and other energy saving measures. And she might test some of the effectiveness of those measures on a digital twin. So imagine a virtual environment that replicates the housing in Essex, and she can test what would be the impact if we changed loft insulation or external cladding, and actually have better evidence to inform the policy suggestions that she makes to local authority leaders. And finally, this bottom box here, we're really mindful at Lottie, and I think right across local government, we want to learn from leading practice wherever it may be. Some of that leading practice might be in other countries, might be written up in other languages. AI can do that trawl, trying to find from across the whole internet, where are there case studies of great practice that that you can learn from, and that we as a whole local government sector can learn from. One more example to share. So Anna, a social worker, her diary gets automatically updated because an elderly resident that was in her care hadn't switched on their kettle that morning. So you can have sensors in social housing environments that can then communicate with an AI, which can understand big changes in that person's behaviour, which might point to something being wrong. This isn't a hypothetical example, I should say. So in the South London Partnership, this is an example where they have saved lives based on sensing how someone uses their home and also using the AI to interpret it. I've mentioned this middle box here about transcribing a meeting with a vulnerable person, but this bottom one here, if we've got enough of those really well written notes, the idea that actually the AI can start suggesting things that might help that resident. You know, people like the person you're talking to now have benefited from the following interventions, not negating Anna's expertise as a social worker, but just trying to make sure the prompts are there for consistent good practice. Final example just to give of future council staff. So this is Jay, a resident engagement officer. I mentioned that ability to translate into different languages. Increasingly now, maybe if you've got online surveys or written surveys, the ability to translate it and have a much quicker job of just checking that that translation is correct can save a lot of time and money. Lots of different ways that we can use these tools, not just for improving our services, but also to improve our engagement with residents. Final thing I just want to leave you with, and it's a word of caution. And I've seen this working in and around local and national governments for the last sort of 12 years or so. Whenever we talk about technology, time and time again, I see organizations getting very excited by what the tech can do. And we start forgetting everything else we know about delivering meaningful change in our organizations. And the key point I want to make is we cannot take this new tech and just sort of bolt it on to what we already do and not think about changing any of the rest. And I often talk about it in terms of, at Lottie, we talk about the hierarchy of public sector innovation. Essentially, many of you, I'm sure, will have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, with the fundamental human needs at the bottom, self-actualization right there at the top. When I think about it in the context of how we change local government, I don't think tech and data are that sort of foundation layer. I think they're right at the top. And I often give the example of social care. So if you can imagine how the local authorities are trying to support very vulnerable residents, tell me that if you agree with this. Now, unless we have out there in our communities people with the right relationships, unless we've got staff with the right skills and capabilities, unless our ways of working are fundamentally sound, unless we've got the right policies and incentives, the right assets and resources, no amount of technology and data makes up for those things being wrong. By contrast, if we can get the bottom of the pyramid right, there's almost no limit to what tech and data, and particularly tools like AI, can unlock and make possible. So I guess my call to you is, you may have come to this webinar today interested in artificial intelligence. I would urge you not to forget the human intelligence needed to deploy these tools with sensitivity, ethically, and really thinking about what could we change about our ways of working, our approach, the way we engage with people enabled by the tool, but not just hoping the tool magically cures some of the pressures and ills of local government. On that note, I will thank you for listening and hand back to Gavin.
Eddie, thank you so much. And you know, the whole host of questions are going to come afterwards, I'm sure, from what you were saying there in terms of the art of the possible, but then also that very healthy and appropriate warning right at the end, which I'm sure we're going to want to explore further. Obviously, people liked it. I saw flying hands all over the screen. What we're going to now do, though, if we can, is just bring in Kieran Johnston, who's the technology strategist from Microsoft. And let's hear your views on it, Kieran. It's good to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to get my slide deck up and available, if you can bear with me a second. Want to say thank you for those last couple of presentations as well. So from Ed and Anna, I think it's really important to recognise that AI doesn't solve everything. Technology doesn't solve everything, and actually what we're talking about or what I'm coming to talk to you about today is around your co-pilot. So not your pilot, not the ability to replace people, but actually the ability to support an individual as they look to deliver their services. And I'm having some technical issues, so if you can bear with me just a second, which is slightly embarrassing. I will grab a different version of the document and share that with you and start. I'll introduce myself while I do that. I think it's important because I do work for Microsoft. I'm a technology strategist working with local regional government. My background, though, is in local government. So I worked directly in local government for 18 years. Prior to joining Microsoft in 2022. So I do have some insight into what it's like to work with our residents and what it's like to deliver services within the public sector. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, initially just almost clarify while my document loads up. When we talk at Microsoft about Copilot, we have got lots and lots and lots of co-pilots. We've essentially become a co-pilot company. Now that's incredibly confusing for lots of people. Hopefully you can now see my slide, and apologies for the false start. We have absolutely loads, and there's one thing that really fundamentally brings them all together, and that's the piece around the responsible AI principles that are not new to Microsoft, but are absolutely fundamental in terms of how we can use AI to support us in the roles that we do. So Microsoft's been delivering on these responsible AI principles for many, many years. This is not new because Copilot's around. This is something that's been in train for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And actually, the really important thing about this is that we work to these when we work internally on the product set and when we work with you around how you can use AI. So clearly there's the piece around fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, transparency and accountability. And what's vital when we talk about Copilot is to remember that every time you use the Microsoft versions of AI, as in Copilot, the data that you access, the prompts that you create, only ever stay within your environment. So all of these issues that we've spoken about and we've heard about around data leaking out or people having access to information they shouldn't have, those things are taken care of when you use Copilot. So I won't labour that point because I'm just agreeing really with what's been said before. In terms of Copilot itself, here's a sample of the Copilots that are available from Microsoft. There's a Copilot for everything. We are going to focus today, and sorry, when I share the slides with you, when you get access to the slides afterwards, you can click through this, have a look and see, and there are more and more coming every day. But we're going to focus this morning on the practical use of AI. So we're going to focus on Copilot for Microsoft 365. So that's where you get AI help in using the applications that you probably use a lot of the time. So things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Teams. And what we've done really at Microsoft is we've taken lots and lots of the developments with AI and ChatGPT over time, and we've hooked them in to your environment, into your applications that you use, and we give access to the AI to stuff that you have access to. So there's absolutely nothing the AI can access that you don't have access to already. It basically mirrors your permissions. We could do a whole session on permissions. I promise we won't, because that's incredibly dry, but it's really important to say you're not giving access to anything that you as a person don't have access to. I'm going to briefly just touch on this, and then I'm going to show you a couple, and if I have time, maybe 3 quick recordings of how Copilot works in practice, and to get you thinking a little bit about how it could work for you. But really, what's important to say is there are options around Microsoft 365 chat, so Copilot across everything, Copilot in Teams, which is great at doing the thing around summarizing chats that are going on. I do have a video that shows how it can summarize a chat and then create email on the back of it. We've got things like Word, where you can create documents based on information, PowerPoint, where you can create presentations based on documents, Outlook, where I came back from 2 weeks leave at the start of last week, and I could go back in and I could ask my Copilot, because I'm lucky enough to have it. I could say to Copilot, please tell me all of the important emails I've had. Tell me what my Teams chats have been. Where have I been mentioned? And it can bring all that information up to me. So it's really acting as an assistant for me. Lots of information here, but we'll share that when I share the presentation round. So what I wanted to do is, it's quite difficult to find some examples that we've got time to run through, because there are loads. What I thought was I'd share 2 or maybe 3 examples and show you a couple of little 2-minute videos, or minute to 2-minute videos of how Copilot works, and talk you through those. So the first one is around using Copilot to put together a project initiation document for projects. So some of you might deliver projects, some of you will know of them or work in them. But here's an example. What we've got here is a prompt, and prompting is absolutely key. And we're asking asking Copilot rather, to produce us a document, a project initiation document for this particular project around implementing Copilot for M365. And as you can see here, we've put in the prompt, and it's now starting to write out a fully fledged document. And it's doing that from the information that it has access to from within the environment. Now it's writing it all out. You can see this, it's doing this in real time as it works through, and it's producing all of the information that we'd want it to produce for a PID. And we have some real life examples of customers that I work with across the east of England who are using this, and it is saving them a lot of time in that first draft of a document. What we're then doing in this example is we're taking this PID, this project initiation document, as you can see here, we're referencing it, and we're asking it to build out a timescale. So we're uploading the information around Copilot, we're uploading the project initiation document that we have just produced, and we're telling it to produce us a table. Produce a table with information in around a timeline, around the timescales and actions. And you can see now, again, it's producing us a set of actions with a start date, an end date, and a duration. It's also put some dependencies in there and some risks. Now, it's just an example really of how you can take information and you can use that information to build new information related to the subject you're talking about. So for you, it might be a project, it might be something else. What we're doing as this example runs through then is we're then saying, actually, I want a bit more here. So you can tweak it. You can go in, you could either do that yourself, or you could ask Copilot to add in this case, references back so that you've got a task number here. So you see it's put in the task number column as we've run through. So that's one small example of how we can use AI and how we can use Copilot in a practical sense as we do a day-to-day job. The second one is around scoring. So in this case, it's taking CVs and looking at interviews and looking at how you can use Copilot to score. It could also be used for first parties on procurement or anything else where you're comparing information. And again, we're not suggesting this would do things for you in lieu of a human looking at things. What we are saying is it might run as a first pass through. It might give you 80% of what you need. And it's just interesting to see these different kinds of scenarios. So in this case, we've taken a number of CVs and we've asked it to look at the job description, to look at the qualifications and experiences and the duties, and then create a scoring matrix. Now, interestingly, again, there's a customer that I work with that has done something similar to this in real life with a procurement exercise. And they had 2 or 3 suppliers bidding for a procurement, and they went through and they scored it manually in the normal way, and then they scored it using Copilot. And it was within a percentage point. Copilot was within a percentage point of the mediated score that was done manually. So in our example there, and I'll just pause it for a second, what we had done is we'd created our table showing the scoring based on the job description. And now we're looking at the interview transcript. So we've transcripted the interviews, we've recorded the interviews and created transcripts. And now we're saying, show the candidates, look against the transcripts and produce another table showing a score as to how they did in their interview. And again, we'll run that through with Copilot. It looks for the information, and then it's going to create the transcript. So we can see here that it's looking at Sandy, Kieran and Sinan. Unfortunately, as it goes through, you'll see that I wasn't the highest rated candidate in this example, but you can see that it's creating information. I think possibly more importantly, it's also giving a narrative at the bottom. So it's saying, you know, at the bottom there that there's familiarity with business analysis methodologies, they provide specific examples, etc., etc. So that's another example there. Now this particular example here, and I'm hoping you're going to be able to hear the sound because I've tried to share with sound. This is shared by Buckinghamshire Council, who have been an early adopter of Copilot. I'm going to run this through. So this is an example where they're showing how a call into the council can be transcribed and then an email generated on the back of it. So I'll let this just run through. Can I double check that you can hear the sound, please? So you'll see there we've asked for the name of the social worker. I'm just going to pause there. When I share the slides, you'll see the whole conversation because it's important to see it through, but I'm going to jump it forward a little bit. So we pick up some more information here. And then what we're going to see is how this call is then transcribed. So Andy stays on the call at the end and transcribes the call, and you'll see Copilot create an email to the social worker to escalate this. So now, as we see Andy type in his prompt, which is a very simple prompt, What I would say here is there's a really important thing to note, which is Buckinghamshire Council use Teams for their telephony. They use a separate third-party contact centre solution. This works. So the important thing is that Teams is in the background. It's not a Microsoft contact centre solution. So see, Andy's asked it to write an email to the social worker with the summary of the call and the context. It's fairly small, but you'll see there that it has created the email. Now, because they're just using this alongside their main contact centre, they can use the copy button and they can paste that into the email and send it off. Now, I think that's really important because that's not a Microsoft crafted demonstration. That's something that Buckinghamshire decided to do and have shared with us. And there's lots more. If you take that to further extensions, you can take those notes, you can copy and paste them into your social care system. You can provide them out, you can create automations, you can do all kinds of things. But the fundamental thing there is there's a call, it's transcribed, you can create content on the back of it. Now, conscious of time, I've got a couple of little bits really now. Just to say that we had an early access program on Copilot, and we had a number of local authorities, and I was lucky enough to work with a few of them who took Copilot around September, October last year. So we're now on slide 11, if anyone is struggling with the timing. What we found is that people who got on and used Copilot really found it useful. Now that might not be a big surprise, but actually one of the really important things is it made people more productive. And I have found personally that it makes me better at what I do. So if you use AI really well in a basic way, as a co-pilot, as a support, it allows you to focus on the things that are important. So now when I'm in a meeting, I can focus on the meeting and I can allow Copilot to take the notes. I can also prompt Copilot to tell me what I've missed or to tell me what that last question was. I can even use it to ask what would be a good question to ask right now in this meeting. I think a couple more slides. One is some early views on impact by function. So again, we'll share these, and there's lots more local government specific stuff we can share. But actually social work and the ability to support those difficult meetings, to write them up, to take notes during the meetings, to keep up to date with policies, to look through all the data that's available and prepare for court is a really big one. And we're working with social care line of business application providers to see how we can hook M365 Copilot into things like Mosaic or Liquid Logic or those core systems. So again, lots of stuff here that you can look through at your own leisure. And a really important point to finish on, because I don't think I've got time for what we would call our sizzle video, which I'm sure you're really sad about. But time savings are the beginning, really. And what we are finding as we work with local councils is that there are huge benefits in terms of satisfaction and well-being. We are starting to hear the narrative around Copilot being important to people, or the use of AI, let's say, being important to people when they consider who they want to work for and their future employability options. And we're also seeing it as being really important for accessibility. And I have colleagues who I work with who are, for example, neurodiverse, and they can talk in glowing terms about how Copilot really helps them. And so there's a real theme around accessibility and inclusivity that is growing as we learn. I'm not going to play the video because of time, but you will have access to it. It's got a lovely soundtrack. I think the last thing I just wanted to do was say that we understand at Microsoft that the best way to use AI and the best way to work with local councils is to get you all working together, and that we need to learn from you. So we do have an innovation and collaboration forum that I run, and we have a Copilot subgroup. It's run by a couple of people from local government organisations. I'd encourage you to have a little look, because the more you work together to find the benefits, to write the policies, to look at the ethics, the better and stronger you'll be. So thank you very much. Back to you, Gavin.
Kieran, thank you so much for that. Cheekily, I was liaising with my PA through that to see whether or not she's been using Copilot, and she does, and she loves it. So there you go. You've got a convert. But now I know how it works. I'll be getting her to use it more. Thank you so much. Three great speakers, three different perspectives. I'm sure there's a myriad of questions. Nikki, is there anything that leaps off that we think we might want to just pose?
So we are short on time, but I guess maybe one question. So how do we ensure that the data we're using and when we think about algorithmic systems aren't reproducing any discrimination? So any thoughts from our panel on that one?
I'm happy to jump in. It's a fundamental question, isn't it? And I think there's an important point to note that the use of AI now is not creating, in this context, it's not creating new data or not creating new issues. What it's doing is probably exposing data that maybe people weren't looking at before. I think the important thing again is also around it being a, to use our terminology, a co-pilot. So whenever you use AI, it's really important to put that human lens on things and to keep looking at where is this being generated from, what are the results, does this look right, does this feel right, and to spend the time on doing that. And actually confidence builds or confidence wanes, but being, accepting that as part of the journey and that will take time is really important.
Great answer. Do Eddie or Anna want to come in and add anything?
I think I always start from the premise that I think, AIs are trained on enormous data sets, assume their bias, I think is, and so as Kieran said, I think having the human in the loop is vitally important, particularly as we are all learning as we go along from here. Also really do a shout out. I can see my colleague Victoria, who's London's Pan London IG lead, do use your IG leads as well for all those questions about what you don't want to do is exacerbate it by mishandling your own local authority data. That's the bit you do have control over to some extent. We're in Microsoft and other big suppliers' hands around how they are building the models in the first place. We must have a very high bar for using these well. Encourage you to engage with your own IG leads robustly on those matters.
Thank you. I'm assuming, Anna, you'd say that for Hackney as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly what both Ed and Kieran have said. Human in the loop is really important. Just cross-reference, cross-check, make sure you know and understand where the information is coming from.
Sound advice. Sadly, we have to draw this conclusion. I was really enjoying that, and what a cracking start we've had to Data Talks today as well. As a songwriter in my spare time, can we please not have them writing songs better than I write? But maybe that's just an aspiration to go for. On that bombshell, thank you so much again for our three great speakers. Big clap, please, on screen for them all. Some great content, and we look forward to seeing many of you later and over the next 3 days as well for more Data Talks. Thank you very much.